On today's episode of the Habitz Podcast, we've got Andy Shaw from Hamlet Homes, and he'll be sharing with us his good habits when it comes to buying an investment property. So first things first, Andy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
And there are people tuning in that would like to know what qualifies you to be our guest expert when it comes to buying an investment property.
Thanks, Mike. I've been investing in Warrington for the last 12 years, and I deal with landlords up and down the country that have their investment properties in Warrington.
So you manage properties for landlords and their investments in the Warrington area through Hamlet Homes?
Through Hamlet Homes, yes, yeah. We help them grow their portfolio, so we've got landlords that have grown from single properties all the way up to 15 and 20, all in Warrington. The first bad habit that I think investors make, especially early in the journey, is they buy the wrong property in the wrong area. By that, I mean in Warrington, for example, I wouldn't advise anybody to buy a flat.
Is that because they're throwing up flats left, right and centre here?
That, and the rent you get for a flat is similar to you get for a two-bed house. However, you've got to take into account, generally, your £100 a month service charge.
Yeah.
So while purchase price is the same, you've lost £100 a month on your rent.
So why do you think they buy flats? Do you think it's because traditionally they are the cheapest and easiest way to get into the property market?
Yeah, I think they're sold the dream that flats are low maintenance. So you can buy a new build flat, there'll be very little to do, which to be fair, there is to start with. But once the block starts going downhill, shall we say, maintenance creeps up, your charges will creep up, your churn of tenants will be more, so you'll end up with more voids. And generally, your rents won't increase in a flat like they would in a house. It's
interesting you say that about flats. So I've got a couple of apartments in Warrington, and the turnover of tenants is a lot higher in that compared to any of the three-bed semis that I've got in Warrington, mainly because it's either single people are in flats, and then as soon as they get a partner or they want to start a family, they're looking to move into a house anyway. So I would say probably a year is the sort of average time for
I'd agree. A year, 18 months. It only takes one nice summer for a tenant to realise I've got nowhere to have a barbecue, have some friends around because I've got no garden. Second bad habit I've noticed is unrealistic rent expectations, especially from landlords that aren't from the local area. They will buy a house or start to look at a house and think they're going to get maybe £50 to £100 more a month, and it just doesn't work like that.
It's an unrealistic rent expectation in terms of how much, especially a new investor, expects to get in their hand at the end of the month, because they don't really consider, like you said, if it was an apartment, service charge, maintenance charge, sort of wear and tear, any insurances that you might need, rent guarantee. It really eats into the amount of profit margin.
Oh, definitely. You don't think if your house is up for say £500 a month, don't be thinking you're going to get £475 every month. You've got to have your gas safeties, all your mandatory tickets are going to eat into your profit. Third bad habit that is so common it's unreal is make sure you look after your property. If your property is of a good specification, clean, tidy, chances are you're going to attract a better tenant. If a tenant walks into your property and it's dirty, tired, if they move in, they're not going to look after it.
So do you think that's really the problem with too many of these shows and too many of these training courses where anyone thinks that they can become a property investor and all they need to do is go into a house, lick a paint, and then they can rent it out for this
100%. The amount of calls we must get 3 or 4 calls a week from people that have been on property courses, and they're looking for tired, rundown properties that they can rent off another landlord potentially, and then give it, like you said, give it a lick of paint as little as possible and turn it around to a tenant and hope they will look after it. It doesn't work like that.
So what are some of the good habits that you see investors that are successful at this? What do they do?
Top tip number one, or top habit number one I see from the good investors is they're buying in the right area. In Warrington, you know yourself, there are good areas and bad areas to invest. And I help them narrow down the right areas, down to street level, because you can get one road that's next to another and you'd buy on one road but wouldn't buy on the other.
So what are some of the things that I'd look for then that was a good area? Is there any sort of amenities local? Is it like close to schools, transport links? How would you define a good area?
A good area in Warrington would be, realistically, would probably walk into a train station. So you've got Central Station and Bank Quay. Both of those will open up your property to commuters, which can be in Liverpool and Manchester, both in half an hour, even London in 2 hours. So if they can walk there, then they don't need parking. They're probably not going to have a car. So you can narrow down your property to match them. I've noticed with investors, especially the newer investors, is they are purchasing their investment property with their heart. They will look at it as if it's a home for them to live in. So I have to sort of change their mindset and realise that it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
If the numbers stack up, it doesn't matter where the property is. As long as it's a good area with good tenants, then it'll work. You're never going to have to live there, so don't think of it as your home.
Yeah, I can see why a lot of people would make that mistake, considering they might have only ever bought a house that they want to live in themselves. But obviously, an investor mindset is it needs to stack up. It needs to be what the yields, how much it can get through the rental income, costs, maintenance, upkeep, all these things that they might have overlooked.
That's it. I mean, you don't think of things like that with your own home. When you walk into your own home, you know the cost is a second thing. With an investment property, it's numbers. Cost is first. Emotion, you just need to forget about altogether. And my final good habit is find yourself a good agent. Build a relationship with the agent. Don't just ring them and ask what they've got and ask if they've got any new properties coming, have they got any landlords that want to sell, because you can guarantee that agent will have current customers that he'll be looking after. So go and see them, go and meet them, take them for a coffee, and they will happily give you knowledge for free. Don't go on any courses. Don't need to pay for that at the early stages. Go and speak to an agent that's got free time for you.
I know a lot of new investors that think, I don't want to pay a management fee to an agent. I can sort this out myself. I've actually tried managing some properties myself, and it can be a nightmare when they're ringing you at late at night, or they don't want to pay the rent that month because a light bulb isn't working and stuff like that. So they're all things that you think to save yourself 8-10%, whatever it might be, it's worth it. But I've found in the long run, having a few properties now since 2011, that it's getting a good agent is sort of imperative if you want to be successful at this.
Yeah, I mean, before we move a tenant in, there's 150 pieces of legislation you've got to have in place. If you start the tenancy in the wrong way, you physically can't end the tenancy.
Yeah.
So it's all about the work up front, which investors tend not to see. They don't see a lot of the work that we do to get the property ready for the tenant, get the tenant moved in, make sure everyone's compliant before the tenant even hands over a penny.
So if I was an investor now and I was thinking, do you know what, I'm looking at investing in the Warrington area specifically, where could we find you if you wanted to talk to you and find out some more information? Yeah,
no problem. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on our website, which is www.hamlethomeswarrington.co.uk.
So thanks to Andy for sharing with us his good habits when it comes to buying your next rental property.